Story 1. Scary movie, the one where they had the exorcist girl urinate on the floor and spin her head around. My mom wanted to read a book and have some me time, so she gave me and my older brother the TV for the night. She called my 18-year-old cousin, asking if Scary Movie was a funny movie since that's what it said in the description. My cousin said yes. Little did she know my mom wasn't the one that was going to watch it, but me as an 8 and my brother as a 10-year-old were going to. Mom was reading a book in the kitchen, and we were watching the movie. My older brother, trying to go to the rescue, tried to turn the TV off as we were already traumatized. The issue was that we didn't have a remote, and he couldn't reach the TV, so he had me sit on his back to turn it off. But because of the stress, we both fell. Mom ran into the room since she heard us, but since she was having me time, she was doing her skin routine in her pajamas, the same exact pajamas as the girl in the movie, and her skin routine made her smear some sort of mud thing on her face. In the heat of the moment, this made everything even scarier. She saw how the movie was way too scary for kids our age and started crying and apologizing. I don't blame Mom and my cousin. Watching the movie now makes me laugh at it, but it did give me sleepless nights for years. Story 2. I hesitate to talk about this because I have legitimate panic attacks related to it, but I'll keep it short. The movie Witches, where the little girl gets sucked into the painting and moves around each day. For some reason, that really disturbed me as a kid. I had to leave the theater, and even as an adult, any media that is suggestive of that idea freaks me out severely, to the point of panic attacks. Story 3. The never-ending story. That scene with Artax in the swamp of sadness messed me up for years. I was way too young to process that kind of emotional trauma. I am pretty sure I refused to watch anything with horses for a solid year after that. It is wild how those scenes just stick with you. Story 4. My brother dressed up as Freddy Krueger for Halloween one year, special effects, makeup, and all. I was probably 3 or 4, and I still have nightmares when I watch it to this day. Story 5. For some reason, E.T. And then in Toys R Us, they put plush ETS on the top of the display shelves, and even in the one when you first walk in, and I still feel the sheer fear in my bones. Story 6. The Day After, about nuclear war during the height of the Cold War. Not a great movie, but the timing was very alarming for many people. Story 7. The Birds. I was still in elementary school when it first showed on TV. We lived next to a school where seagulls would gather by the dozens in the parking lot after rains. For the puddles, I assume. We also had crows in the area. I had to leave the room when the birds started attacking in the movie. I saw it at least 6 times before I saw it in its entirety. As an adult, I can see how fake the birds looked. But I still don't trust a huge flock of them hanging out anywhere but the beach. Once I finally saw how it ended, I was left with, what? That is it? No answers? Just drive away. Alfred Hitchcock was definitely the master of suspense. Story 8. That scene in Pee-wee's Big Adventure when the trucker lady's head turns all crazy, her hair turns into snakes, and her eyes pop out to scare Pee-wee. Yeah, that scared me pretty badly. Story 9. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I was around 10, and my family was on vacation. We were staying in a motel, and my father decided we were going to watch that movie before going to bed. I didn't sleep that night, and I don't think my brother, who was about 6 at the time, did either. I'm now 39, and I'm still not all that comfortable around clowns. Story 10. Hotel Rwanda. I saw this film when I was very young, and there were certain scenes that stood out as disturbing to me. Additionally, the DVD must have had a scratch and it froze at certain points of the film. There is one scene where the main character looks down at his tie, then laughs because he messed it up. He then proceeds to scream, and right in the middle, it froze. That particular moment disturbed me. Story 11. Child's Play, featuring Chucky. Scream. Also, one episode of a show called Millennium featured a clown. I hate dolls, ventriloquist dummies, clowns, and mimes to this day. I admit I am quite timid when it comes to scary movies. Story 12. An early black and white movie depicted the Titanic sinking, showing how they locked the poor people in with metal doors on the lower decks, causing them to drown. I was supposed to be asleep in bed but sneaked out to watch it from the hallway, and was so frightened that I gave myself away. It haunted me for years. Story 13. Dante's Peak. When Pierce Brosnan catches the kid before he jumps into the hot spring, and the mist clears, you see the two boiled bodies. That scared me immensely for years. Story 14. Goddamn Candyman has me terrified of being in the dark or in front of a mirror for 10 years. My brother and cousins made me watch it when I was 8 years old. But I love Tony Todd, so now it's cool. Story 15. Wizard of Oz. I would beg my mom to let me watch it, and then have nightmares about the flying monkeys. I would swear every year I wouldn't, and then it would happen. Story 16. An American Werewolf in London. I saw it on cable at my aunt's and uncle's house in 1982 or 1983 when all of the adults were watching it. I have only seen about 3 minutes of it in the intervening 40+ years. I still remember bits and pieces of it. I remember trying to fall asleep that night. I was pretty scared. I also remember my dad covering my eyes during a shower scene. Story 17. The Butterfly Effect. They showed that movie to a bunch of middle schoolers at my camp, without really knowing what it was about. We were all way too young. Story 18. Signs. I can't watch thriller, suspense, or horror movies to this day, something like 20 years later, and I saw it in 6th grade, hiding behind a wall of pillows in broad daylight. Story 19. House on Haunted Hill and Jacob's Ladder. The fast head-shaking thing always creeps me out. Also, the mutant bears from Prophecy. We camped a lot, so I was on high alert. Story 20. Alien. I was supposed to be in bed, but I had a habit of sneaking out and sitting in the doorway of the living room from the hall. Their backs were to me, and they would always have the lights down while they chilled at night there, watching movies. I sat there and watched that whole movie and was scared to even walk back down the dark hall into my bed. I didn't do that again after seeing that movie. I was scared for weeks and made them leave my light on when I went to bed. They never knew why. Story 21. The uncut version of The Exorcist. The scene where she was masturbating with a cross, saying, "F me, Jesus, F me," still kind of haunts me. Oh yeah, an old yeller. Seriously. Saw it as a young child. Rough. Story 22. The poorly made 1980s VHS tape my sex education teacher showed us in our Catholic school in Mississippi in 2009, which traumatized us instead of actually teaching accurate information. Story 23. The Truman Show. Not a scary movie, but it definitely made me paranoid during my adolescence. Ironically enough, the increasing surveillance of modern day is basically worse than that movie, but I've just grown to accept it. Story 24. Bambi. I had been begging my parents to take me to the movie theater for the first time. I was probably around 7 or so. I didn't make it past the first scene. I ran sobbing out the door when they shot Bambi's mom. I'm 53 now and still don't like movies. Story 25. Magic. I had a Charlie McCarthy ventriloquist doll and had been practicing for about a year. My babysitter took me to the drive-in, and that movie was showing. I got so scared that I begged my mom to get rid of the doll. I've never practiced again. Story 26. The 10 Commandments, 1956. I was a little kid, and I was excited to learn more about the Bible and see Moses and God in action. I left the theater terrified because they seemed to be a couple of loud, deep-throated, tantrum-throwing, lightning-tossing, tablet-hurling, mass-drowning, child-killing bullies. I couldn't sleep and had to crawl into my parents' bed for 2 or 3 nights after that. Story 27. Audrey Rose. It was a horror-ish movie about reincarnation that came out when I was around 12, and it freaked me out so much. I was pretty obsessed with reincarnation for several years. About 10 years ago, a coworker of mine mentioned his new granddaughter had been named Audrey Rose. Story 28. Paranormal Activity, either the first or second part, really affected me. I slept with a flashlight under my pillow and was scared to get out of bed to use the restroom for maybe half a year, if not longer. Story 29. Alice in Wonderland is the story of a girl who falls down a really deep hole, gets stuck down there in some weird, nonsensical world with a load of opium-smoking crackpots and tricksters who mess with her and set impossible cryptic puzzles. No parents to look after her and nobody helping her find a way home. Scared me a lot when I was about 6 years old. Story 30. History Channel documentary about finding the concentration camps in World War II. I distinctly remember a small bulldozer moving bodies into a mass grave in particular from that one. Story 31. Midnight Express. Certainly freaked me out. I was about 6 years old, and my favorite song at the time on the radio was a song from the movie by Giorgio Moroder. It's still a good song. Anyway, I begged my parents to take my sister and me out to the drive-in to see it. At one point in the movie, my mom had to explain to me that the man was suckling his girlfriend's breast because he needed the milk. This certainly turned me off any idea of being incarcerated in Turkey. Story 32. I want to say it was Critters. There's a specific scene stuck in my head. It looks like one of the critters, but my memory tells me the kids, for some reason I can't remember, had to put a penny in a slot in its head. Not a thin slot, but a penny-sized hole, and the penny would slide down into who knows where. I've searched off and on for that scene, but can't find anything. Story 33. Leviathan. I was still sitting in my dad's lap, young and aware. He knew what was coming. The tentacle jumps out of the cabinet and into a guy's chest. He grabbed me and yelled. I did actually pass that trauma down the line to my first son 20 years later. Story 34. Starship Troopers, specifically the brain bug scene. I saw the movie when I was around 8 years old, and to this day I get squeamish about head wounds in movies and look away. I'm normally strong-stomached, but I just can't stand that stuff because of that movie. Story 35. When I was 8 years old, I used to watch Rugrats all the time. One day, I stayed over at my sister's house, and she asked if I wanted to watch a movie with her. She told me it featured a little red-haired boy named Chucky. I assumed it was like the character from Rugrats. Turns out I watched Child's Play. The whole time I was so scared. I froze up and sat through the whole movie. I couldn't speak up or walk away because I was too mortified. On the bright side, I was that kid who wasn't scared of anything. Nothing fazed me except dolls because I really disliked that. Story 36. Hollow Man. Really scared me down to the core, man. The scene where they injected the serum and Kevin Bacon's skin vanishes really scared me as a kid. Not gonna lie. Story 37. Jurassic Park. I was so terrified of the Tyrannosaurus Rex that I had to sleep with a night light for a month. And I was convinced I could hear it coming to get me from the backyard when I was 10. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? The steamrolling scene. Gremlins. All the gross ways the Gremlins got murdered. Story 38. Watership Down. Hands down, it's not an animated movie about rabbits fit for children from 7 years. Psychedelic, brutal, bloody, and overall really traumatizing. I still have nightmares of the gassing the rabbit hole scene. Story 39. Not really any of the horror movies I saw too soon, but The Labyrinth, because I was scared goblins were going to take my brother every time I got mad at him and told him to go away. Story 40. Harry Potter. That scene with the ghost girl traumatized me so much. I couldn't go to the toilet or shower alone for 2 years. I only ever saw that scene. I never watched the whole movie. Story 41. I specifically remember the ending scene where the guy who is melting gets hit by a car and explodes. I've never seen the whole movie, but that scene still sticks with me, many decades later. Story 42. At first, for me, it was the Final Destination movie that featured them in the theme park, with all the characters having somewhat possible deaths due to roller coasters. Seeing this movie at a young age, I developed a phobia of roller coasters and never wanted to get on them. Eventually, I broke that habit and now I'm in love with roller coasters. Life is short, enjoy the little things. Story 43. Not sure. Traumatized. Scared me good. Original The Omen and its sequel. Then there is Jaws. Kept me from going beyond knee-deep at the beach for decades. Story 44. The Towering Inferno. I was way too young when I saw a rerun on television. I've had nightmares of dying in a fire since. September 11th didn't help. I don't care how upscale it is. I'll never live in a high-rise or sleep in such a hotel. Story 45. That Michael Jackson movie they played at Disney World in the 1980s. Captain EO? That tube lady really affected me quite a bit. The tape lady in Superman 3 didn't help much either. Story 46. When I was around 5 years old, my dad tried to show me the movie Twister from 1996. I almost walked away because that opening is intense, but I managed to sit through it, and then I fell in love with the movie and disaster movies in general. Story 47. Honestly, I can't remember one. I always hated horror movies and shows, and I know my dad watched a lot, but I honestly don't remember anything specific. Probably the closest was the Talking Tina episode of Twilight Zone, but I was a teenager when that bothered me. And even then, it's weird that it bothered me because the idea of living dolls in general never has. And knowing me, the idea of a very protective one should have been a good thing. Story 48. Fantasia, with the dancing elephants, the dinosaurs, and especially the devil sequence at the end, still affects me. I am 36 now, and I refuse to watch it, even though I have both films on Blu-ray and love the second film. Story 49. When I was 6 or 7, my parents thought it was a good idea to watch Jurassic Park for family movie night. Obviously, it doesn't scare me anymore, but back then, I had nightmares for days. Story 50. Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. We grew up religious, and my parents encouraged digging in the backyard, always talking about how we might find cool artifacts. I was afraid I'd find the Ark of the Covenant and that my face would melt off.